All right, ready to tackle this China study guide. It's pretty in-depth, but don't worry, we'll break it down together. It covers everything from dynasties and philosophies to key figures. We'll even try our hand at some map work. But first, question one. What do we know about this grassland biome north of China?
You're talking about the steppe, right?
Yeah, the study guide calls it a vast grassland biome.
It is vast, that's for sure. And cold and dry. It might seem kind of bleak, but it really had a huge impact on shaping China's history.
So it's not just empty grasslands, there's more to it.
Oh, definitely. The steppe was home to tons of nomadic horseman groups like the Mongols and the Huns. They were fierce warriors, constantly challenging China's defenses. Imagine it like this historical crossroads where these nomadic cultures clashed with the settled agricultural communities of China.
So this constant interaction, it influenced how China protected itself.
You got it. Think about the Great Wall. It wasn't just some random building project. It was a direct response to the threats posed by those nomadic groups. A pretty impressive testament to how geography can shape a civilization, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, totally. Okay, let's move on to question two. It asks us to compare legalism, Taoism, and Confucianism. Three very different philosophies, huh?
Absolutely. Imagine them as different blueprints for building a good society. Each one has a distinct vision of how people should act and how governments should rule.
So legalism, it looks like it's all about rules and order.
Right on. Legalism emphasizes strict laws and punishments, the kind of system favored by rulers like Qin Shi Huangdi. He believed that a strong, centralized state was crucial for keeping things running smoothly. Control and order were key.
Interesting. So if legalism is all about control, what about Taoism? Seems like it's the opposite, right?
Yeah, you could say that. Taoism, founded by Lao Tzu, is about finding harmony with nature. Balance is key. Living in tune with the Tao, the natural order of things. It's less about imposing rules and more about letting things flow naturally.
Okay, so legalism is about control. Taoism is about going with the flow. Where does Confucianism fit into all of this?
Confucianism, developed by Confucius, focuses on ethical behavior, education, and the importance of strong leadership, what they called superior men, in government. It's had a deep impact on Chinese society, with its emphasis on virtue, respecting your elders, and doing what's right.
Gotcha. So three distinct philosophies. Legalism for order, Taoism for harmony with nature, and Confucianism for ethics and good leadership. Question three now. It's about Buddhism, the founder, the whole concept of suffering, and the ultimate goal of this spiritual path. Where do we even begin?
Well, Buddhism started in India with Siddhartha Gautama, better known as the Buddha. He recognized that human life is filled with suffering, or dukkha. It's caused by our attachment to things that don't last and our constant desire for more.
It's tough to argue with that, right? Life is definitely full of ups and downs.
Exactly. So his teachings offered a path to enlightenment called nirvana, a state of freedom from all that suffering.
I can see why that would be appealing. Now, question four asks specifically why Buddhism gained popularity in China, especially during that chaotic period after the Han Dynasty fell apart.
You're talking about the period of disunion.
Yeah. What's the connection there? Why Buddhism and why them?
Well, put yourself in their shoes. Imagine constant war, famine, and upheaval everywhere you look. People were desperate for answers, for comfort, for something to give them hope. Buddhism, with its focus on compassion, inner peace, and overcoming suffering, it provided a way to make sense of all that chaos.
It makes sense. A spiritual refuge in times of trouble. I get it. Question five now, and this one feels big. It wants us to match major Chinese dynasties with their key characteristics and achievements. Kind of like piecing together a giant historical puzzle, wouldn't you say?
It does feel that way. We've got the Sui, Tang, Song, Yuan, and Ming dynasties. Each one left its own mark on how China developed.
Where should we even start with all of that?
Let's start with the Sui dynasty. It wasn't around for very long, but they managed to reunite China after that period of disunion we just talked about. Plus, they started building the Grand Canal.
Ah, yes. That massive engineering project connecting North and South China. Pretty ambitious.
Seriously, a monumental feat that connected those fertile rice-growing regions of the south with the political and economic centers up north.
So Sui dynasty equals unification and massive infrastructure projects. Got it. What about the Tang dynasty? What made them stand out?
The Tang dynasty is often considered a golden age for China. They had a flourishing culture, a booming economy, and a powerful military. They also formalized the civil service exam system based on Confucian principles.
Wait, so they actually used exams to choose government officials?
Yeah, it was all about finding the best and brightest, regardless of their family background. This helped to create a more meritocratic system. Talent and knowledge matter more than who your parents were.
Interesting. Sounds like a pretty forward-thinking approach. Okay, so the Tang Dynasty was all about culture, prosperity, and merit-based government. What about the Song Dynasty? What did they bring to the table?
The Song dynasty followed the Tang, and they continued that trend of cultural and economic growth. They were known for their technological innovations, things like gunpowder, the compass, and printing. Those inventions had a massive impact on the world, not just China, and they saw a big increase in urbanization and trade, making them a global powerhouse at the time.
Wow, so the Song Dynasty was a time of innovation and global trade. Now, the Yuan Dynasty, they were the Mongol dynasty, right?
Exactly. The Yuan dynasty was established by Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson. They conquered all of China, abolished those civil service exams the Tang had put in place, and relied heavily on foreign advisors.
So a pretty big shift from the Tang Dynasty's focus on Chinese traditions and meritocracy.
Yeah, for sure. The Yuan dynasty opened China up to more trade with the West. It was a period of significant cultural exchange, but also a big departure from how things had been done in China for centuries.
I can imagine that caused some tension.
Yeah.
So the Yuan Dynasty represents this break from tradition, with Mongol rule and more interaction with the West. What about the Ming Dynasty? They were the ones who came after the Yuan, right?
That's right. The Ming dynasty brought back native Chinese rule. They reinstated the civil service exams and even embraced exploration for a while. You know about Admiral Zheng He and those incredible voyages he led.
Yeah, those massive fleets sailing all over the place. Pretty impressive.
Right. They reached Southeast Asia, India, Arabia, even the east coast of Africa. But then something interesting happened. The Ming dynasty shifted gears and adopted a policy of isolationism.
Isolationism, like shutting themselves off from the rest of the world. Why would they do that after all that exploration?
It's a good question. They wanted to preserve China's culture and traditions, but in the long run, it ended up hurting them. They missed out on new ideas and innovations happening elsewhere.
Interesting. So we've got the Sui, Tang, Song, Yuan, and Ming dynasties, each with its own unique characteristics and contributions. Now, question 6 asks us to identify some of the key figures who shaped China's destiny. Emperors, generals, even an empress, a fascinating mix.
It is. And their loyal legacies are still felt today, even after all this time.
Okay, so let's dive into this lineup of influential figures. The first one is described as the first emperor who unified all of China under one government, began construction of the Great Wall, and favored legalist philosophy. Who does that sound like?
That would be Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi, a figure both admired and feared for his ambition and his ruthlessness. He really was a force to be reckoned with, a visionary for sure, but also obsessed with control. He was convinced that legalism, with its emphasis on those strict laws and harsh punishments, that was the only way to keep his vast empire in check.
So power at all costs, basically.
Pretty much, he standardized weights and measures, currency, even the written script, all to promote unity and control. And get this, he even had scholars buried alive for questioning him.
Whoa, talk about extreme measures. And of course, there's the Great Wall. Can't forget about that.
Right. That massive barrier he built to keep out enemies. Talk about ambition. And maybe a touch of paranoia, too. It's a powerful symbol of his drive to protect his empire, no matter the cost.
Okay, so next up, we have a very different kind of leader. The study guide calls him Emperor of the Sui dynasty, who reunited China after the period of disunion and started building the Grand Canal. Sounds a lot less intimidating than Qin Shi Huangdi.
That's Emperor Wen. He was known for his practicality and his knack for bringing order after chaos. He understood that after centuries of division, China needed a leader who could bring people together and rebuild.
So more of a unifier than a conqueror.
Exactly. And his biggest achievement, probably the Grand Canal, that massive waterway linking North and South China.
That was one of the largest infrastructure projects in ancient history, right?
Oh, absolutely. A monumental undertaking, showing just how ingenious and determined the Chinese people were. It really helped boost trade, transportation, you name it, connecting those fertile rice-growing regions in the south with the political and economic hubs up north. It helped create a more unified, prosperous China.
Now, question 6 also wants us to identify this fascinating figure. The only woman ruler of China who established her own dynasty, the Zhou, after becoming the empress during the Tang dynasty. Talk about breaking barriers.
Empress Wu Zetian. She was a remarkable figure in Chinese history. Ambitious, intelligent, and she wasn't afraid to be ruthless. She was a master at navigating the complexities of court politics.
So kind of like a female Qin Shi Huangdi.
There are definitely some similarities. She was willing to use any means necessary to get what she wanted. She eliminated rivals, consolidated her power, even challenged Confucian norms by declaring herself emperor. But she was also a capable ruler. She promoted education, supported Buddhism, and strengthened the military. She was a complex figure, for sure.
Definitely ahead of her time. Okay, on to the next figure, and I have to admit, this one's a bit intimidating. The study guide describes him as the Mongol general who united the Mongol tribes, conquered northern China, and established the largest land empire in history. Gives me chills just thinking about it.
Yes. Genghis Khan. Brilliant military strategist, charismatic leader, a figure who inspires awe and fear even today. He came from those harsh steppes of Mongolia, united the Mongol tribes, and launched a wave of conquest that stretched all the way from East Asia to Eastern Europe.
He's like the Alexander the Great of the East. How did he manage to build such a huge empire? What was his secret?
Well, Genghis Khan was a master of adapting his military tactics to the terrain and his enemies. Logistics, discipline, mobility, he understood it all. But maybe his greatest strength was inspiring fierce loyalty in his followers. He created a system where skill, not your family name, determined how far you could rise. A true meritocracy.
So a brilliant warrior A&D, a shrewd leader. His conquest of northern China must have been a turning point for Chinese history.
Oh, absolutely. It marked the end of the Jin dynasty and set the stage for the Yuan dynasty, which his grandson Kublai Khan established. It was a time of huge change. The Mongols brought their own culture and ways of governing to China.
All right, so we've got Qin Shi Huangdi, Emperor Wen, Empress Wu Zetian, and Genghis Khan, all incredible figures who shaped China's course. Who's next on our list?
Next, we have the Mongol general who finished conquering China, the one his grandfather started, and then established the Yuan dynasty.
Kublai Khan. He's the one who finally defeated the Southern Song dynasty and brought all of China under Mongol rule.
That's the one. Kublai Khan was a smart and practical ruler. He understood that to rule effectively, he needed to adapt to Chinese customs and traditions. He took a Chinese dynastic title, moved the capital to Khanbalik, which we now call Beijing, and supported Chinese art and culture.
So he tried to blend Mongol rule with the existing Chinese systems, not just force a totally foreign system on everyone.
Right. He knew that finding that balance between Mongol control and respecting Chinese sensibilities was key, and he was really interested in expanding trade and cultural exchange across his vast empire. The Silk Road flourished under his rule, connecting China to the West in ways never seen before.
Kublai Khan, not just a conqueror, but a builder and a visionary. He helped shape a new era of global connections. Our final figure in question 6 is described as Admiral for the Ming Dynasty, who led exploratory voyages throughout Asia and collected tributes for the Ming Emperor. Sounds like someone with a serious sense of adventure.
Zheng He, an amazing admiral and explorer who led 7 grand voyages during the Ming Dynasty. His expeditions, with those massive fleets of ships and thousands of crew members, reached all over Southeast Asia, India, the Arabian Peninsula, even the east coast of Africa.
Those voyages must have been something else. What was their purpose? Conquest? Or more about exploration and diplomacy?
Zheng He's voyages were mainly about diplomacy and trade. He was tasked with establishing relations with foreign rulers, showing off China's power and wealth, and promoting trade and cultural exchange. He brought back exotic goods, tributes, and valuable knowledge about the wider world.
So, like a maritime ambassador, spreading China's influence and broadening their horizons. But why did these voyages eventually stop?
Well, after Emperor Yongle, the guy who really supported Zheng He's expeditions, died, the Ming court became more inward-looking. They saw those voyages as a drain on resources, a distraction from problems at home. And Confucian scholars who had a lot of influence weren't so keen on these maritime adventures either. They thought China should focus on internal affairs, not the outside world.
A shift in priorities, then. A turning inward that ended up stopping those incredible voyages. It shows that even in a civilization as vast and enduring as China, the course of history can change because of the decisions of a few people and the ideas that hold sway at the time. Okay, on to question 7. This one's about those recurring cycles of unity, prosperity, decline, and chaos we see throughout Chinese history. It's a pattern that seems to repeat itself over and over.
Yeah, it's a pattern you see in many civilizations, but it's especially noticeable in China. A dynasty rises, establishes order, things get prosperous, culture flourishes, but then over time, things start to shift. Corruption might set in, internal divisions pop up, or external threats emerge.
And that leads to the dynasty's downfall. Yeah.
Exactly. The old dynasty falls, a new one takes over, and the whole cycle starts again. The Yuan dynasty, for example, they had a pretty dramatic fall when a typhoon wiped out their fleet during their attempted invasion of Japan.
Wow, that must have been devastating. Talk
Yeah.
about bad luck.
It was, and it definitely contributed to their eventual defeat by the Ming dynasty. The Ming, however, faced a different problem. They decided to isolate themselves. They wanted to protect China's culture, but it ended up stifling innovation and leaving them vulnerable when challenges from the West came knocking.
So they turned inward, closed themselves off, which probably felt safe at the time, but ultimately weakened them.
Right. It's a good reminder that empires need to adapt and change to survive. Clinging to the past can be just as risky as expanding too quickly.
Now, question 8 asks about a concept I find really interesting. Tianxia, often translated as all under heaven.
Tianxia. It's a powerful idea that's been shaping Chinese thought for centuries. It's about seeing China as the center of the world, a civilization with a responsibility to bring order and harmony to everyone within its sphere of influence.
So it's not just about geography. It's about China seeing itself as a cultural and moral leader.
Exactly. And it's deeply connected to Confucianism, with its emphasis on hierarchy, order, and the role of a virtuous ruler in creating a harmonious society.
Okay, so how did this idea of Tianxia actually play out? How does it affect China's relationship with the rest of the world?
Throughout Chinese history, there's been this strong belief that a unified China with a strong central government is essential for peace and prosperity. Periods of division and disunity are often associated with chaos, war, and suffering. This pattern has reinforced the idea of Tianxia that a strong, unified China is crucial for bringing order and stability to the world.
Like a ripple effect. If China is stable and harmonious, that positive energy spreads outward, benefiting everyone. But if China is in turmoil, that instability can cause problems for its neighbors and beyond.
Precisely. And this concept of Tianxia has also influenced how China views its place in the world. Traditionally, China sees itself as a cultural and moral leader, a model for other civilizations.
Like with the tribute system, right. Neighboring states would send envoys to the Chinese court, acknowledging China's superiority and offering gifts in exchange for recognition and protection. It wasn't just about economics. It was about reinforcing this hierarchical world order with China at the top.
You got it. And this worldview has stuck around in various forms throughout Chinese history, shaping how they interact with other cultures and civilizations.
Okay, on to question 9. This one asks us to fill in a pyramid representing the traditional structure of Chinese society. It's about understanding where people fit in and how those roles contribute to the overall harmony of society.
At the top of the pyramid, naturally, we have the emperor, the son of heaven, the ultimate authority, responsible for ruling justly and wisely. Below the emperor, you have the gentry, composed of nobles, landowners, and scholar officials. They were the educated elite, often chosen through those tough civil service exams, and they played a crucial role in running the empire.
They kept the government going, collecting taxes, maintaining order, upholding those Confucian principles. They were highly respected for their knowledge, virtue, and service to the state.
And then we have the peasants, the largest group, the backbone of Chinese society. They worked the land, grew the food, and kept things running. Even though they were lower on the social ladder than the gentry, their role was recognized as essential. Confucianism stressed the importance of agriculture and hard work, so peasants were seen as honorable, even if their jobs weren't glamorous.
And at the base of the pyramid, we had the merchants. They were the ones involved in trade, commerce, making money activities that were sometimes viewed with suspicion by the Confucian elite who favored serving the state over personal profit.
Exactly. So even though merchants contributed to the empire's economy, they weren't always given the same respect as those who worked directly for the government. This whole social hierarchy reflects the values of Confucianism, order, duty, and the importance of education and moral character.
It really shows how philosophical ideas can shape the very structure of a society. Okay, on to question 10. This one's all about putting our geography skills to the test. We need to label key features on a map of China. Time to navigate those rivers, mountains, and coastlines.
I love this part. It's like we're explorers setting out to discover the geographic secrets of China. Pinpointing major cities, tracing the paths of those mighty rivers, and identifying those strategic coastlines that have played such a crucial role in China's story.
So let's start with some of those iconic cities, centers of power, culture, and trade throughout Chinese history. The study guide specifically mentions Karakoram, Beijing, and Hangzhou. Can you tell us a bit about each one?
You bet. Karakorum was the ancient capital of the Mongol Empire, right in the heart of the vast Mongolian steppe. It was a bustling center of trade and diplomacy, linking east and west along the Silk Road.
And then there's Beijing, the modern-day capital of China. A city steeped in history, with the magnificent Forbidden City, the imperial palace that served as the seat of power for centuries.
Exactly. And Hangzhou is another city known for its beauty and economic importance. It sits on the picturesque West Lake and was famous for its silk production and role as a major trading port.
Now let's turn our attention to those impressive rivers that have shaped China's destiny, providing fertile land for agriculture, transportation routes, and even inspiration for their art and literature. First up is the Huanghe, also known as the Yellow River. Why is this river so important in understanding Chinese history and culture?
The Yellow River, named for that silt that gives it its color and makes the North China Plain so fertile, has been both a blessing and a curse for China. It's the cradle of their civilization, providing water for irrigation and transportation, but it's also prone to terrible floods, which is why it's sometimes called China's sorrow.
Then we have the Changjiang, or Yangtze River, the longest river in Asia. What's its story?
The Yangtze winds through some amazing landscapes, from the Tibetan Plateau all the way to the East China Sea. It's crucial for transportation, trade, agriculture. It connects different parts of China and supports a huge variety of life along its banks.
Now, the study guide also asks us to identify the seas that border China. Let's start with the Yellow Sea.
The Yellow Sea is bordered by the Korean Peninsula and the Shandong Peninsula, a region full of history and culture. It's been a key waterway for trade and transportation for centuries.
And then there's the East China Sea, which I hear is a pretty dynamic body of water.
You're right. The East China Sea is where the warm waters of the Kuroshio Current meet the colder waters of the Yellow Sea, creating a dynamic ecosystem with tons of marine life. It's seen periods of peaceful trade and intense maritime rivalries throughout its history.
And finally, we have the South China Sea, a vast expanse of water dotted with islands, reefs, and atolls.
The South China Sea is rich in resources, but it's also a source of tension and territorial disputes today. It's a reminder that geography doesn't just shape the past. It also influences the present and the future.
Okay, so we've covered the major cities, rivers, and seas that have shaped China's destiny. Anything else on the map we need to find?
Yes, the study guide also mentions the Grand Canal and the island of Taiwan.
Ah, yes. The Grand Canal, that incredible feat of engineering connecting North and South China, linking the Yellow and Yangtze rivers and allowing for the smooth flow of goods, people, and ideas. And Taiwan, that island just off the coast of mainland China, has played a complex and often contested role in Chinese history and continues to be a point of contention today.
Exactly.
So we've explored a lot in this deep dive. We've looked at those repeating cycles of dynasties rising and falling, the enduring concept of Tianxia, and the traditional structure of Chinese society. We even navigated across the vast landscapes of China, finding key cities, rivers, and seas that have shaped its fate. Now, what does question 11 ask?
It focuses on that island just east of the mainland we talked about.
Taiwan, right? What does it ask about Taiwan?
Just wants us to be sure we can find it on a map.
Got it. I think we're good there. So that wraps up the map section of this study guide. Before we finish up this deep dive, though, I'm curious, what stands out to you the most as we've gone through all this? Anything particularly fascinating or surprising?
It's amazing how interconnected everything is. You know, we've got geography influencing defense strategies and trade routes, philosophies shaping government and social structures, and individuals rising to power and leaving their mark. It's all woven together like a giant tapestry, creating this rich and complex history of China.
I totally agree. It's not just about memorizing names and dates. It's about understanding how all these pieces fit together. I hope you've not only gained a solid understanding of the key facts, but also developed a sense of wonder and appreciation for how rich and complex Chinese history is. It's a story filled with drama, innovation, and resilience, a story that continues to unfold today.
And remember, this is just the beginning of your journey of discovery. There's so much more to learn about China's past, present, and future. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning about the world around you.
Great advice. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Chinese history and culture.